time we get to first thing Thursday. Again, cold enough for a touch of frost in some rural areas in the north, but for most towns and cities, there's temperatures holding up between around 4 and 8 Celsius. And then for Thursday, well, it's slow changes really, not too much different compared to what we'll see on Wednesday. Perhaps a bit more cloud in certain parts of the country, particularly central and eastern areas, and it could be quite grey and misty around some coasts of eastern Scotland and northeast England. Elsewhere though, west is generally best for sunshine, and that's where we'll see the highest temperatures too. So a bit of a mixed bag for sunshine amounts on Thursday, more cloud generally for Friday and Saturday, and those temperatures just coming down a touch.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, good evening. Welcome to Tuesday night's Headliners with me, Simon Evans. Very shortly, my comedy guests and myself will be going through tomorrow morning's newspapers to see what they have in store for you. But in the meantime, here's Polly with the news right now.
And the headlines today: Boris Johnson has apologised to MPs for breaking COVID laws during lockdown in June 2020. He addressed the House of Commons for the first time since he was fined before holding a private meeting with Tory politicians. Conservative MP and former Chief Whip Mark Harper published a letter saying he'd lost confidence in Boris Johnson and that he's no longer worthy of being Prime Minister. Boris Johnson said people did have the right to expect better of their leader.
As soon as I received the notice, I acknowledged the hurt and the anger. And I said that people had a right to expect better of their Prime Minister. And I repeat that, Mr. Speaker, again in the House now.
Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, refused to accept his apology.
What a joke. Even now, as the latest mealy-mouthed apology stumbles out of one side of his mouth, a new set of deflections and distortions pour from the other. But the damage is already done. It's what he does. It's who he is. He knows he's dishonest and incapable of changing.
Well, MPs will have to decide on Thursday whether the Prime Minister should face a parliamentary investigation into claims he misled Parliament on that issue. Boris Johnson himself won't be there at the vote. Instead, he's going ahead with a planned trip to meet India's Prime Minister on that day. Well, the Prime Minister is said to have accused the Archbishop of Canterbury of having misconstrued the government's policy on sending asylum seekers to Rwanda. Sources say that in a private meeting with Tory MPs, Boris Johnson accused Justin Welby of being less vociferous in his condemnation of President Putin than he was in his attack on government policy. That comes after the Home Secretary defended plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda in the Commons today. Priti Patel saying access to the UK should be based on need and not on the ability to pay people smugglers. She also told MPs the new bill complies with domestic and international legal obligations.
This type of illegal migration puts unsustainable pressures on our public services and local communities. Every day, the broken asylum system costs the taxpayer almost £5 million in hotel accommodation alone. And as the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, said last week, we cannot sustain a parallel illegal system. Our compassion may be infinite, but our capacity to help people is not.
Well, Boris Johnson has also said today that G7 leaders have agreed to work together to find a long-term security solution to safeguard Ukraine's future. In a call with the US President and other G7 leaders, the Prime Minister stressed the need for further military support in the face of Russia's offensive on the eastern border. UK intelligence shows that Ukrainian forces have repelled numerous Russian advances today, despite an increase in shelling along the Donbass control line in the east of Ukraine. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian President, Volodymyr Zelensky, says the situation in Mariupol is as tough as possible.
In this war, the Russian army will forever inscribe itself in world history as perhaps the most barbaric and inhuman army in the world, deliberately killing civilians, destroying residential quarters and civilian infrastructure, and using all kinds of weapons, including those prohibited by international conventions, is already the brand signature of the Russian army. And this is such meanness, which for generations will mark the Russian state as a source of absolute evil.
Volodymyr Zelensky. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now it's time for Headliners.
Thank you, Polly. Hello and welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Joining me tonight, our second night of North Americans, we have Eric McElroy. We seem to be devoid of homegrown talent, and Dana Alexander, either side of a significant border, but from the same continental landmass. Anyway,
Yes.
How are you both?
Good.
Not
Yeah,
jet lagged?
thank you.
You've both had time to adapt to our climate and so on.
Yeah.
How long have you been here now, Eric?
Well, since Saturday.
Saturday.
Well, that's because I was home on vacation.
Yeah, where did you go?
To Long Island. Got a New York slice and a bagel with cream cheese.
Is that quite a Jewish place then? Long Island?
Well, New York bagels, they're beautiful.
Yeah,
and
they
the
are
pizza
good.
is just the best in the world.
I have missed it so much. It's still worth going there then.
And I saw my
It's not
family,
over.
but I
'Cause
ate
they
food.
were kind of sounding the death knell for New York after COVID. They're saying nobody's
it's
going
fine.
back. Is it coming back? How about you, Dana? Did you get any holiday action in?
Did I get some holiday action? I got a little bit of work in. I was in Dubai and Iraq. I went to Iraq.
Went to Iraq?
Yeah, that
Who
was.
books that?
Who books that? That's all.
And you were doing some stand-up comedy there?
Yeah, we were the first gig in Kurdistan. It was Erbil, which is a region, obviously, in Iraq. So, yeah, the first one that wasn't for the troops.
That's
Congratulations. That is a very promising sign.
They bombed it 3 weeks later.
Little buds of spring popping through the frozen civil turf of Iraq. Probably doesn't pay as well as it used to when there was a threat of being blown up. They used to be quite a bounty for that. Anyway, let's take a look at tomorrow's front pages. We will start with the Daily Telegraph. There we are. Germany isolated as West sends heavy arms. But the picture there is illustrating, of course, Boris Johnson's humiliation in the House of Commons. Next up, we have... which one have we got next? The Independent. Senior Tory lead calls for Prime Minister to quit over party time. We may be able to find out which that senior Tory is later. The Independent, that's the Guardian next. Their front page has a man without shame. PM savaged over parties. That was Keir Starmer's assessment of him, of course. Financial Times is Britain poised for slowest growth among G7 nations, predicts the IMF. We will be taking a look at that, but illustrated again with the shambling shabbiness of Boris Johnson. The Mirror is a little more punchy with its Johnson's walk of shame, and also Ronaldo tragedy, a story we covered last night, just saying. Next we have the Daily Express. What a waste of time. So much more is at stake. They feel that the Partygate scandal is rumbling on past its sell-by date, clearly. The Metro, we follow up that with I'm truly sorry. The Prime Minister, it did not occur to me that I broke my own COVID laws at Downing Street Bash. And then finally, the Daily Star, who as ever brighten up our gallery with soz, not soz, Klingon PM. Klingon pun being reached to maybe for the first time for decades since that was at its height in the 60s and 70s. Anyway, those are the headlines. We will dig into them very shortly. So we start with Wednesday's Mail, and the story we've all been eagerly anticipating. You can watch the TV while driving, Eric. You pluck this one out away from the headline.
Well, this is in the headline, but it just broke, basically.
Oh,
so
okay.
I think the Daily Mail has gone with the squirrel approach of, look, squirrel, for everything happening to the poor Prime Minister, and talked about the fact that soon, with self-driving cars, as long as they're going under 37 miles an hour, you can watch telly.
So this is true? This is not a joke headline that you've sort of copied and pasted onto the front page?
It is a joke that they're covering this rather than what Boris Johnson and Priti Patel are doing and everything else.
Why 37 miles per hour as well? That doesn't seem that's not a normal speed limit.
Well, then it's hard to watch the TV because the TV gets all jiggly.
Okay.
And it's harder to see the image. I
Yeah.
think. But I'm sure there's a reason why it's 37.
What speed am I no longer allowed to just prop my phone up on the dashboard and watch YouTube? Is that a different
zero is the current speed of that, Simon. In your own driveway is
but
where that's
they're like podcasts. It's not live. It's not like I'm kind of glued to the action.
No, it's not fine. But
so
it's a ridiculous
That's
story
a genuine story that the Mail have gone with. Well, OK, let's see what they're trying to distract us from. Wednesday's Guardian, I mean, all the papers have covered it. He's paid the fine, to be honest. I really don't see what all the fuss is about now. But Eric, go on. Oh, no, this is Dana, actually, has got this one, is it? Yes, sorry.
Yes, this is mine. And I will say that, he has paid the fine. But what I thought was very interesting, I looked at a case study in January 25th in Enfield. Torino Reed was hit with a £14,000 fine for having 44 people at a garden party. Wow. So we have to ask the question, is he actually paying his fair share when it comes to the fines?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think a lot of people do feel that if you're going to find somebody, it should at least be something that should
be comparable.
Not got him folding in his pocket, is it?
That's half of his takeaway order. Let's be honest about that.
How do you feel about it emotionally? Do you feel it's rumbling on? Do you feel it's obviously they're not going to get the scalp they wanted, are they? I think they would need to have made the Tory party feel so ashamed of him that they would get rid of him, and I think that moment probably has passed. So what is the strategy now?
I think that, the strategy before obviously was distraction, but they're not going to let him off the hook for this. And I'm sure you remember when he was being probed about this in Parliament, we need to wait for the findings, we need to wait for the findings. Yeah. And the findings are in, and there were 16 parties. And I don't know how he's going to, everybody's not to be rude, but, there's not as much hype around what's happening in Ukraine anymore, and they're not as distracted.
No, it's true. I don't think anyone would really sensibly be able to argue that we couldn't have a change at the top now that the crisis is so heated and changing so fast that it would be unmanageable and inoperative. What do you think, Eric?
Well, I think I'm going to give Boris Johnson his due. Today we saw him at his best. And his best is apologising for being caught for something.
Yes.
And, he's been caught lying in the past, and he's done well apologising for that. He's been caught having affairs at best. He's apologised for that. So, it's incredible that you have a leader of a country that you can just basically call a liar, and it's not libelous, and he's guilty of it.
Do you know what that's called? An apololie.
An apololie. Is that real
It's a mixture between, it's a drag queen word. It's a mixture between apologising and lying at the same time.
They should do that as a show, live at the Apololie. That would be the drag queen comedy crossover we've been waiting for. Theresa May shared her views on the Rwanda plan, which was at the same sitting in the House of Commons, and this, I think, in a way, is proving almost more damaging for the Tory party, possibly than Partygate, or at least it's like certainly not casting them in a good light at the moment.
Yes, and she did that on the grounds of legality, practicality, and efficacy. And we have to think about, when people are talking about the burden that migrants put on the system, we have to actually wonder if this offshore processing will cost more or less. If you look at what's happening in Nauru, the offshore processing in Australia, it's costing the taxpayers in Australia 4.5 million Aussie dollars per year per person.
It's like a pound, isn't it?
And the other thing that really gets me is
per refugee.
Yeah, per refugee.
Wow, that is
per refugee.
extraordinary. What do they do out there?
Well, the government is like, where's the money?
Just like foot massages. Well, I suppose, the counter to that would be that this is intended as such a powerful deterrent on which we could just discuss whether it is a deterrent, but it's intended as a deterrent so that within a couple of months, nobody is going to pay 10 grand to cross the channel and be immediately put into a down to Rwanda.
Well, the real issue is if people are legitimately fleeing from persecution, they're going to take it. They're going to try to get over the channel. This could even change the way that traffickers operate. First of all, it's going to drive the prices up. The thing that I think we really have to think about is these are traumatized people in so many cases. Come on, they're right in the middle. When you're running from the situations, whether it's, poverty, war, famine, we can go on and on, you're putting them in Rwanda and you're really just re-traumatizing them.
That's not really quite true, though, because they're in France, aren't they? I mean, I don't like it.
Okay,
but, truth is, they're...
I have fled France. I mean, who doesn't?
But you're saying that, but do you want to live in a forest
No,
in
of
disbanded
course not.
Calais?
But they're not running from a burning building. They've escaped the burning building, and now they're choosing where to spend.
Okay, well, I think I feel pretty
traumatized.
traumatized.
For choosing us over France, but you can't quite equate it with the sort of heightened, adrenalized kind of moment.
I think I think what happens when the route is not considered legal, you put...
I like the way that goes into inverted commas, whereas Boris Johnson's, he's broken the law. Those were illegal parties without any kind of scare quotes.
He wrote the laws.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter whether he wrote them. They are illegal. You don't have to use scare quotes.
Sure,
they have skipped around a well-established system, which many people queue up and wait years to get into the country.
But seeking asylum is not illegal. That's
no, but they're not all... This is the question, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
Whether they are.
And people don't always have access to safe routes.
But do you think it will... You don't think it will produce... It will provide a deterrent? You think people will just do it anyway?
I'm in the court of it remains to be
What about
seen.
Theresa May? My understanding of Theresa May's point was that she says this is something that's going to be used primarily on young men who are perceived to be economic migrants. Women and children, on the other hand, who might be perceived to be genuinely fleeing terror or terrible regimes or whatever, they are still likely to be have a chance of staying in the UK, which just means that they will be more prey.
Just because they're men, it doesn't mean they're not persecuted. And if you really want to look at some of these...
I'm just asking you for Theresa May's opinion on this. I mean, it was just a report in the news. Is that what she said? I think
yes,
so.
she was implying that. And but I mean, you get perverse consequences like that. That happened on the U.S. border when unaccompanied children would be allowed through, and so people started sending their children alone with phone numbers written on their arm, and because they were allowed through the border, separated from their families.
And then when there were nightfalls, you activate the child and use it to sort of...
Pritchie was asked whether that was going to happen. She wouldn't address that question. Yeah. She was asked what proof does she have that this would de-incentivize families to come. She wouldn't answer that question. She had no answers to any of the fundamental questions from her own party about how this is actually going to work at all.
Very quick, yes or no. Do you believe it's a sincere plan, or do you think it's intended really more as a sort of dead cat, as some people have said?
I don't think it's a sincere plan. I don't think it's workable.
No, I think it's awful and racist.
Thank you very much. Wednesday's Guardian now back with Eric, FDA and PCS till JRM to BTFO over WFH. Do you want me to elucidate any of those?
I like what you've done with that there. I'll break that down a little bit without acronyms. But this is the civil service unions are upset with Jacob Rees-Mogg, which I'm sure has happened probably a number of times, because of his vindictive way of trying to encourage people back into the office post-COVID. Basically, the unions are upset because rather than bringing people forward, he's gone more with the shame approach, where he's created a league table of the government departments where people are coming back in the least, where they're working from home the most.
Okay.
And in case you're wondering, the least coming back into work, only 25% are coming back into work from the Department of Education. So the Department of Education is at the bottom of the league table.
So they're homeschooling themselves.
They're homeschooling themselves, essentially. Followed by 27% back in the office, work and pensions. Right. So I'm sure detractors are going to say they're going towards the pension side.
Retired,
They're retired there. I think Rees-Mogg is upset about this because he was thrown out of the House quite early in COVID. Because would you want him in the House?
Well, he was probably sent to prep school at 7.
Oh,
he's
exactly.
Quite, used to the idea that you can get out of the House.
Most of his family. But he was accused by the union rep, which I quite liked, of being a Luddite. And I would imagine, if I were going to look up the definition of a Luddite in the dictionary, I would expect a picture of Jacob Rees-Mogg.
He carries the look. What do you think, Dana? Working from home, I mean, it's hard to say as a comedian, isn't it? We need audiences, really. It doesn't really work for us, but I understand why some people might prefer it.
I do understand that, and I think we can all obviously admit that the cost of living has gone up. If we look at things that, were born out of COVID, for example, QR, ordering at your table, that's not going anywhere. You remember how many shops were shut when we got out of COVID, and when you go to all these different towns. So people have to cut their operating costs. That's just a fact of life. Yeah. But it also has knock-on effects, right? How are the restaurants doing in these areas?
Absolutely.
Trains are only being are up to 75% occupancy pre-pandemic.
We're coming back onto that. I do kind of feel, I must admit, when I go into Westminster and just walk around through, Trafalgar Square, Whitehall, all that, it does feel a bit dead. And I wouldn't I know that isn't the job of the civil servants to provide ambience, but nevertheless, I think. Wednesday's Times now. Pegasus software enables phone to be used as a listening device. We've gone full circle, Dana.
Yes, we have.
I've tried to download this software. It's not on the App Store. I don't know whether is there a special code you need or something.
I'm not sure. So agents have swept Boris Johnson's phone after hack on number 10. So Boris Johnson's phone was analysed by cybercrime investigators after Downing Street was targeted by hacking software. It has been reported. The Downing Street attack was orchestrated by an organisation linked to the UAE, according to the international cybersecurity body that unearthed the infiltration. Unable to find an infected device. But a perfect way to find some stuff on Boris.
Well, I
just need to check your phone.
It's just going to be a proper party this time, is it? Because it was a bit boring last night. I mean, that would be the end of him, wouldn't it?
If I was Boris Johnson's current wife, I would want him to have that app on his phone.
Yeah. My wife has got a similar sort of domestic version on her kids' phones, and vice versa. She's got hers as well. I refuse to have it down. I find it all very sinister, but I can see which way the water is flowing,
Yeah.
We're all going to be surveiled pretty soon, aren't we?
We already are. Every device we carry tracks where we are all the time.
Times next, Eric. Global growth to slow.
Yes.
But are the Greens delighted? I bet they're not, are they? I bet they're not grateful for this.
Probably not.
Kind of recession.
I mean, this is growth forecast slashed by the IMF, warning about inflation. They're pinning it fairly hard in this article on the Ukraine war. And they're started by, it should be called the Russian war, really, in Ukraine. But the UK and world GDP is going to be going down. The Europeans are going to be hit a bit harder than that, although, as you said, one of the other articles talked about the UK being the worst hit in the G7. The article in the Times here sort of picks on Europe a bit more. But it says,
I had a look at the table earlier today on Twitter, and it's quite interesting. There are figures for 2019, 20, 21, 22, and then projected for 23. Obviously, projecting 18 months away is still a bit of a crapshoot. But what's interesting is you can pick any column and find something to support where you're inclined. Do you know what I mean? It looks like we had the best year coming out of COVID, but then we had pretty much the worst cratering from COVID. But we don't know quite what caused that. We've had a couple of quite good years ahead of the EU average, but then it was from a very low base. Do you know what I mean? And there's always this kind of, how does it mount up? And on top of all of that, it's kind of speculative anyway, isn't it? Do you take a lot of store in this kind of stuff, Dana?
Well, I kind of think at the end of the day, we have to look at what's going to happen with Brexit. And this government's very lucky because they have two scapegoats. They have COVID and Ukraine. So, it's not surprising to me that it is the slowest growth in the G7. We can see what's happening with different companies trying to manufacture their goods to Europe and vice versa. It's going to be a problem.
I've got to say, from an inflation point of view, which isn't necessarily anti-growth, of course, it depends on what measures the Treasury takes to bring down inflation, and that can then be anti-growth. But probably the one factor that nobody's talking about, certainly not in terms of limiting, the visible effects of Brexit, is China, which is still taking extraordinary measures in order to limit the spread of COVID and is causing a real kind of supply chain kind of problem. I mean, because it's kind of dull compared to Ukraine. It doesn't seem to be getting talked about, but it's probably more significant for Britain. Germany is suffering from,
Well, I mean, because I think Shanghai is in lockdown or was in lockdown, and all of the ships outside of Shanghai. There was an image going around also on Twitter that showed all the ships that weren't being allowed into port, and that's going to have a ripple effect.
And I don't know how adaptable they are. I have a shipbroker friend. I must ask him about this, but I have a suspicion that a lot of ships are going to be, requisitioned for carrying fuel, for oil and gas, which might otherwise have been carrying, TV and games consoles and stuff.
Sure.
So there's going to be a lot of that going on.
I can't get my new TV?
I just wouldn't throw the old one away yet. Keep it on the dashboard for now.
All right.
Last story before the break, green shoots of recovery, but not for Bulb. Dana, sorry.
Dana, I'm
Diana
Dana.
on the screen, my apologies.
So, boss of collapsed energy firm Bulb is still being paid £250,000 per year in salary before it went bust, despite the company receiving $1.7 billion in a government payout.
It's a perfect cluster, isn't it, of things that would anger a left-leaning. A fat cat still getting his salary after he's failed to keep a company afloat despite a massive bailout. And what is it, 6 months now? Is he basically a caretaker now? Is that the idea?
Well, I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to get rid of the company, and they haven't been able to do so.
But I mean, it on eBay.
And they haven't been able to do so. But yeah, I mean, you know what this sounds like to me? A little bit of socialism.
Might be. It is funny, isn't it, how they like come to the government when it's...
it's like the bailouts, exactly.
Be libertarian. What do you think, Eric?
Well, yeah, he wouldn't say if the company's up for sale, and I wouldn't either, but wanted to sell. If I'm making £21,000 a month, I'd be happy with the status quo.
Yeah,
so, you know, just keep it as it is, I'm sure he's happy.
Calling it Bulb was an error as well. If they should have called it something much more utilitarian than that, just kind of the boring energy company.
And when we moved into our current house, this was the current electricity, so you get the bill from them first.
Really?
And I switched. I was like, I've never heard of them.
Bulb.
But I mean, 1.8
Yeah, I heard about them today.
Exactly.
It's an inherently comical word, isn't it? Captain Beefheart used to mutter it fast and bulbous on his Trout Mask replica album. There's a reference I didn't expect to be weaving in. We've reached the end of part one. Coming up, we've got cancelled plays, cancelled mask mandate, and cancelled bird feeding. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Our sponsors would very much enjoy it if you would buy their goods and services. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, Eric McElroy and Dana Alexander. So Wednesday's Guardian once more, Eric, and a brief hiatus in the collapse of Western civilization has been achieved, although I'm sure it's only a pause.
Yes, this is an interesting thing between sex education and violence education. This is a sex education theater show for children has been cancelled over violent threats because, God forbid, we teach children about good sexual health.
Oh, you're a groomer. I didn't realise,
Yes,
Eric.
exactly.
I'm so sorry.
According to these gentlemen. gentlemen.
And now I feel embarrassed to have put you on the spot. So you're pro this, are you?
Well, I mean, this is it's called the Family Sex Show.
Yes,
and it's
a
meant
lot of
to,
things are called things. The Nazis were called National Socialists. Who would have thought that could go wrong?
I think calling this Family Sex Show, comparing them to the Nazis, might be a step too far.
No, they're probably
but that's probably kinder than the threats that they probably got from the general public. But it's a show designed to teach sex ed to young people up to down to 5 years old. So of course that led to some violent threats and protests
Including
and so
what?
on.
Including, let's have a...
It did include, it covered lots of different relationships. It talked about
suggested,
gender.
for instance, you go online and see if you can find images of animals masturbating. That was one of the study notes that they had, for instance.
And it did have nudity in the show as well, which, to be fair, covering that and nudity, it's a show I would have gone to see.
Of course you would.
But it just astounds me that people are more comfortable with violence than they are with talking about sex.
No, but they're not,
and talking about it in a healthy way.
They're not asking you to take your children to see a show, a violent show.
Well, but they're bringing violence to the table in order to stop people from educating children.
We don't really know that, do we? Have you actually seen any of the violent threats that have been made? It seems to... I went through the newspapers and the BBC website. All I could see was that this was a reported...
Yes.
This was the conclusion. We have received violent threats.
Yes, I did.
I haven't actually seen what they are.
I saw, covered in the story that talked about what the threats are.
Box your ears. What do you think, Dana? You're pro?
I think I am for this because, first of all, it's discretionary. You don't have to take your kids to this. Sex education in school is also discretionary. And one thing that I think is really important to teach kids about is molestation. They need to know when somebody is doing something wrong. That's how kids are preyed upon. I mean, I was also one of these kids. I look like a grown... I could buy cigarettes when I'm 11. Yeah, I did. I did do that. I bought cigarettes when I was 11. Because I look like a grown woman. I was getting catcalled at the age of 12, and I was too naive to understand what's going on. So I do think that there has to be some education. I think it should be up to the parents, but nobody's forcing anyone to go and see this show.
No, that's a fair point.
I think we would have less sex abuse if we were more open in talking about things like this and educating children and having a healthy conversation about it.
Well, I suppose there's always a line and a limit, though, isn't there? That would be the argument. And I think some of the people saw some of the material that these people were talking about.
But did they actually see any of it?
Or I've seen plenty of it on... I mean, not the show, because it hasn't existed yet, although apparently it will be going ahead in one theatre to a private audience, an invited audience, in Stroud or somewhere like that. But
Stroud.
But there's plenty of material that they've put out in support of it that you can see what they're talking about. It's not just like... If a bad man comes up and offers you sweets or to see the puppies in the van, you have to say no.
But did you think it was dangerous for your children to see the material?
Dangerous? Well, I certainly wouldn't take them to see it, but I understand your point about... I mean, it depends on the age. Mine are 18 and 14 now. I think there was definitely an age at which I thought that would create more anxiety and confusing and turbulent emotions than they would know how to handle. And I don't mind them seeing things that they... My 14 and older and my wife watch the TV show Sex Education all the time. There's some fairly explicit and funny stuff in that, but he's 14 now. That's kind of fine.
I'll give you an example of someone who was uneducated in sex education. My boyfriend's friend, they don't really have sex education in Iran. And he convinced his friend that he should be getting his period by now. And this young man went to the doctor and asked the doctor why he hadn't started menstruating. Like, you can really mislead... People need to know.
If we needed an Amdram theatre company to get men over that misconception, I think we'd be in a lot of trouble. But maybe we are. US judge strikes down masked man date. This one's from Wednesday's Telegraph, Dana. This is the transit authorities, I think, are no longer enforcing masks. Is that right?
Yeah, so a Trump-appointed judge has scrapped the U.S. mask mandate on public transport as major airlines drop the requirement, which means we're not going to get to see those wild videos anymore.
No.
Of those Americans getting thrown off planes. No. Oh, my God.
Those are my people.
Those are my people. Your people,
you
man.
Canadians are all calm and civilized. We are fighting for our freedom of our faces.
I'm for anything that keeps Americans fighting. It's so entertaining.
Well, you can have prayer meetings, guitar-accompanied prayer meetings in airspace now as well. Did you see that one?
No, I didn't. I didn't.
It was an Easter ceremony thing. Yeah, it was pretty extraordinary. So anyway, it seems to have all gone. I don't know why Trump appointed. Is that relevant? It's not considered to be a far-right thing, this, is it?
Well, the fact that the Bar Association said she was unqualified for the post might be part of the story that's there. But, I mean, I have a solution to this because we got upgraded to business class when I flew to New York a couple couple weeks ago, and they considered us in our little bubbles, so they just kind of winked at us and we took off our masks.
Wow.
That's just money.
That is
makes you mask free.
A little bit of privilege.
Business class I've ever heard of.
Yeah, it was nice.
Story from the land of the brave now, and indeed the squaw. This is from the Times, Eric.
Yes. A professor has been given a $400,000 payout from a university that disciplined him for refusing to use a transgendered student's preferred pronouns. This professor, his name was Nicholas, so I'm assuming he's a he, and I'm going to use...
Is it in Swanee University? What's it called?
It was a Swanee State University in Ohio. And but I'm going to Professor Nicholas Merriweather. I'll call him he because I'm not a jerk. But in class, the transgendered student, who he said the transgender student said that she would like to be called she, and this professor claimed it was against his Christian faith to be kind, I think.
And you know what I would have said to that professor? Girl, stop. And see how he liked it, because there's a power dynamic at play here, right? And it's potentially humiliating for a student.
We've skipped a stage here, okay? So yes, perhaps he's being ratty,
so
but then clearly something else happened before
the university
he was getting $500,000, right?
Yes.
So how did they react?
So the university disciplined him and reprimanded him. He claimed it was
reprimanded or sacked.
I don't think he was sacked. I think that he was written warning.
There was a discipline for $500,000 worth of.
Well, have you seen American courts and the way that we compensate people for distress? This poor man. I don't think he was sacked, but basically the initial lawsuit was thrown out. Then that was overturned in the federal court, and the university could have appealed it again, but just decided to settle.
You think that using a person's preferred pronouns is kind, and I would probably agree with you on that. If he is inclined to think that it's the thin end of a wedge that he doesn't like, which is going to dissolve all notions of sex and gender having any interconnectivity that's meaningful in the world, and he really doesn't like that idea, and he would rather not do it, do you think he should then be compelled to do it under threat of sanctions such as are then compensated for to this degree?
He's asking for his freedom of expression to trump the student's freedom of expression. So I think that's where it's unfair.
It's his expression. He's not asking for the student to stop calling herself she.
But then if she decided to call him she... So if she said...
What would happen then? You think
what's going to happen then? And then is he going to sue her for that? So I think that's where it gets
Is he? Ask yourself that seriously. Do you think
considering he refused to recognize the person's chosen pronoun, I would imagine he would.
Would you imagine that, really?
I would imagine that.
What do you think, Dana? Do you think he would?
You know what? This guy will do whatever he needs to do to get $400,000. Let's be honest here. Let's just have basic manners. You know, I've met people, and I've said this before, and I wasn't even aware whether or not they were male or female.
Yeah.
And I didn't sit there and, misgender them. I would say they. It's just basic decency, especially when you consider the power dynamic in the setting of a classroom.
I think that power dynamic is shifting somewhat at the moment. Anyway, a story from the Times about yesterday's men now. Whatever happened to ISIS, Dana?
Oh, yeah. So ISIS is urging jihadis to strike Europe and Israel while the West is distracted by the Ukraine. They want to support and avenge the death of Abu Ibrahim al-Qureshi, I think is how it's pronounced, the group's founder, who was killed in February during a raid on his Syrian hiding place by U.S. Special Forces. I mean, are we surprised? I mean, at the end of the day, ISIS is still happening. That's what's wild to me. Everybody kind of has this idea that it's over. And I think that this is a to be continued, especially when you consider the state of Afghanistan.
So when it says they're urging people to do that, is this like on the
I don't know.
Messaging system? I was trying to work out.
Yeah, I was trying to how did they intercept this?
Well, there's some Telegram message, and Telegram's a frequent communication device used by people who want to hide where they are and who they are and so on.
Yeah, so that's what it was.
And there was another speech online and so on. I mean, part of it seems to me that they're just not getting the press that they used to. This is why North Korea pops up every now and then and goes, look, we have missiles. Don't forget about us. That's a little bit of what
This is one I found more amusing. I have to say, Eric, this is a story about killjoys trying to eliminate belief in the supernatural.
Yes, exactly. So The Guardian is covering this. Online casinos are facing a crackdown on exploiting gamblers' superstitions.
I feel that's a big part of gambling, isn't it?
So, I mean...
I've got to get lucky. If you take that away, it all just becomes a bit utilitarian.
Well, you might know the house is going to probably win, But these games were advertising showing that there were hot and cold machines, or because it's online,
winning streaks.
Which is the hot machine or hot game, which is the cold one. And one of their ads featured a tarot card reader who was using the app to kind of indicate which way to play, which to me, is the best ad for gambling that you could possibly make, because you've got tarot cards, which aren't real, and gambling, which is rigged, or allegedly, probably, I should say.
But the odds are in favour of the house. That's all you need,
the house,
isn't it?
So, I mean, but it plays to the fallacy that people think that you can find a streak that's hot.
It's extraordinary, though. I've never been a gambling addict. I have never had any kind. I don't even like casinos. Whenever I've been in casinos, I've been in like half a dozen. They're nothing like they look like on James Bond, are they? They stink. You know, they kind of usually stale sweat and tobacco, and it's just a lot of people who have got nowhere to go that night, you know, and have ended up there. But it's quite interesting whenever you encounter something else that can build that same Wordle. Do you know that word game right? You play this and people show it on Twitter. I had a chat with Richard Herring, comedian, like quite a long chat. He's got systems and he's convinced, you know, they work. You know, and it's like if you get that one in place, and I'm like, no, I mean, there are tactics and there's a skill to doing it, and you need a decent vocabulary, and you can see how letters combine to make words. But there's no kind of.
Do you remember Wheel of Fortune?
Yes.
So basically, there was RSTLNE. So if you can get a 5-letter word with any of those letters in it, you have more of a chance of hitting.
Yeah.
That's actually true.
That's a system that had. Was Vanna White?
Vanna White.
Vanna White.
Vanna White.
The first time I ever went to
Sajak.
Canada in 1987. She was a superstar then.
She still is. We're talking about her now.
Legend.
Amazing. We've reached the end of part 2 with an unexpected Vanna White tribute. Trust me when I say we've saved the best till last. Don't go away. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners with me, Simon Evans, Eric McElroy and Dana Alexander. We're into our final straight now, and Dana, somebody is finally calling women on their privilege. This is from The Telegraph.
So, yes, according to The Telegraph, modern feminism is racist and only focuses on straight, white, middle-class women. So, you know, intersectionality in feminism is not a new concept. In fact, the whole term intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. And if you even look at what happened with the suffragettes when it specifically came to voting rights, these voting rights weren't for all women.
No, absolutely.
These voting rights were for white women, so they may have a point here.
And wealthy women, propertied women, I think, as a rule, weren't they? Yeah. You're right. There's always been kind of fudge, and certain things have been overlooked. And heroines possibly have as many skeletons in their cupboards when the time comes to it as heroes do. What do you think? I mean, it did feel... I suppose the question is, at this point, we should contextualise it. This is an expensive and very prestigious North London girls' school. I think it was an all-girls school or possibly a mixed school. It might be co-ed, I'm not sure anyway, but certainly the girls within it took advantage of an opportunity to anonymously blow the whistle on a rape culture that they thought had developed within the school. And it became quite a significant scandal a couple of years ago. This is Highgate School. And now they were having this kind of, they're having a series of seminars and opportunities to discuss this. And the first one they were confronted with was, hey, listen, you know, you think you're being feminist because you're blowing the whistle on rape culture in your school, but actually you're just a bunch of privileged white women because you already go to this North London £22,000 a year private school. In that context, it does seem a little bit insensitive, perhaps.
Well, what I think what happens when you have some kind of an abuse that happens, specifically, let's say, with a group of women, you have to look at the most vulnerable people of that group, because usually they are the ones that are being most abused. And in many cases, you know, they don't have that voice. No one's even paid attention to it. Do you know what That's my personal opinion.
What do you think of it?
Well, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, the one thing, because there is a new language and terminology that, like, I've got a 16-year-old daughter, and she's totally across all of these, the gender terms that are there that a lot of people that are maybe older or not exposed to it are uncomfortable with. But I learned a new one in this article, which was cis-het, which is someone who their birth is, they identify as their birth sex and they're heterosexual.
Can't believe I've known that word for at least a year and you've only just discovered it.
I know cis, but I hadn't seen cis-het.
Heterosexual.
Yeah, heterosexual.
I'm pretty much up on intersectionality, as I say, because for me, as a straight white male, it suddenly introduces all kinds of new layers of guilt on the part of various women, which is fantastic. You know, it's not just the simple me versus the world thing. Everyone has some kind of problematic...
All the things you've done.
Vectors of oppression. Anyway, women take most new seats on the board, Eric. This is one of feminism's more old-fashioned aims, and it seems to be coming true.
Yeah, more women are taking... This is an article in the Times, that more women are taking their place on boardrooms with the biggest companies and now make up more than half of all new appointments. Not half of the boards, of course.
And
That'd be a step
something
too far.
like 3/4 of the men who've left the people the board directors who've left in the same period have been men.
Of course.
So there's a significant shift.
There's a shift happening. So it was only 53%, though. That was the majority that was coming through. And on the a gain of 200 women on the FTSE 350 boards. So if this trend continues over the next 2 years, we might reach actual parity on the boards, which, you know, some people might think, well, this is just bean counting. It's not right. But when you look at, you know, women make up 50.59% of the UK, it makes sense that you have that balance on the boards of the companies that are providing services and providing goods and providing all of these things, to have that balance there. That seems to make sense to me.
I think it also gives it an added function of, you know, better functionality. I think there was a case of, I think it was one of the only banks that didn't go under in the crash of 2008 was a bank run by women in Iceland. So I think that they're actually finding that when we have environments that are a little bit... The easiest way for me to put it, I don't know if you ever remember the times when you had flatmates. I found the best houses were when it was very mixed, right? Half men, half women, because we do complement each other in many ways.
I agree. Funny enough, I used to be sceptical about it, but Tim Harford, who I used to make a few radio programmes with, this sort of economist and political scientist, he wrote a great, was a chapter in a book about it called Messy, which was about how diversity, a lot of people feel it's not working when they're in the middle of it initially, like a lot of boards, or like if they create a team, you know, in an exercise to solve a problem, but the solutions they come up with often work better. In the same way that finding a leader who is not necessarily demonstrating all the traditional leadership qualities of, you know, the kind of jutting chin leadership qualities, but instead quieter, listening, reflecting, bringing people in, not appearing like a leader, but actually getting great results. It's quite interesting how some things are quite counterintuitive in that respect. So, we're all on board with that one. Dana, some great news for domestic tourism now, although I still think bringing back the buffet pork pie is the key to getting the trains
buffet pork pie. So million half-price tickets are going to be offered in order to tempt passengers back in the Great British Rail sale. And I don't know if anybody here has taken the train in the last little while, but the prices have gone up. They're absolutely crazy. And I think one thing that a lot of people don't really think about is, one thing I thought was crazy in this nation was that I could get to Denmark for a fifth of the cost of a train ticket to Manchester.
Yeah. If you buy your tickets early enough, they're not too bad.
Yeah.
But if you leave it too late, then they get incredibly expensive.
But the problem is, with now COVID, everything's pulling and stopping, so you can't necessarily be buying stuff in advance, right?
No, absolutely. You can't be sure. What do you think, Eric? Is this going to work?
Oh, I think it's a great idea. I just wish that we made commercials in this country like they do in America, so that you've got the Great British Rail Sale. Every ticket to Leicester must go now. That's what I want to see.
I seriously do think they should bring back more exciting buffet cars and trolleys. I get the train up from Brighton to London. There used to be a trolley. It was a cup of tea and a Twix bar. It wasn't terribly exciting, but there was a little bit of human interaction as you went through Crawley. Do you know what I mean? It just lightened the mood slightly.
Not as much as the football fans. I remember this one drunk guy was chasing that guy with the alcohol cart from Manchester, and they had to lock him in first class. It was hilarious.
This is the colour that we like. It brings a little bit of life into the play. Now a wild swing into a crazy dystopian cyberpunk noodle future with chopstick trickery. Eric, what's going on here?
I like that introduction. This is in The Guardian. It's the saline solution, which is in Japan. They've invented an electric chopstick that will make your food seem more salty.
So this doesn't actually contain food, or it's not coated in food. It's some sort of...
It's a weak current, so you're basically electrocuting yourself into flavour.
Wow.
So it's got a little electrical simulation. You have to wear a wrist on, or a little mini computer on your wrist.
Wow.
And then it transmits sodium ion from the food into the chopsticks and makes it taste salty.
Umami, isn't it? Umami,
Saltier, the
flavour.
umami,
Yeah, the sort of mouthfeely one. Yeah.
The other thing that, because apparently the Japanese diets are quite high in sodium, so they're trying to bring them down. But what I like,
they live the longest of anyone, honestly.
Fair enough.
How long do they want to live, these people?
But this company, I don't know if you guys saw this, they've also invented a lickable TV screen.
Oh, no, that I've had for years.
The Japanese come up with some wild stuff.
I know.
Does it taste of stuff, though?
I think that would be the idea.
Wow, that's amazing. That may be something that we can introduce into this next story. This is slightly less dystopian, but more Princess Leia in Star Wars, a sort of holographic... Who's taking this one? It says
this
Eric,
is me, yeah.
Yeah.
So, in the event of Armageddon, desperately seek kelp. So what they're worried about, seaweed might have to be farmed as it needs less sunlight than usual land crops. So, just in case we have a natural disaster or an atomic bomb blow up, there's going to be sediment that will go up into the air and block our sunlight, which will, of course, affect our crops. So they're looking to maybe shift us.
They've reacted very quickly to the conflict in Ukraine then on that front. Just like thinking, well,
when this comes out,
need, guys.
It sounds like it almost dropped the bomb, the way that they've planned this. So
well, this will go well with the electric chopsticks, right? Because kelp, I would imagine, not the tastiest substitute source of carbohydrates, but maybe if we can get some electric chopsticks, it can jizz it up.
Try the seaweed.
I like it.
Snack.
Crispy. Yeah. Is that the same stuff like the Japanese?
Yeah.
It's a snack, though, isn't it? It's like poppadoms before the meal. You wouldn't want to have it as your staple.
Yeah, but
I would agree.
If you put some potatoes in the ground quickly enough, you could get potatoes. So you can still have chips.
Yeah.
So chips
and
potato.
I know
seaweed.
they grow underground, but do they not require sunlight on the leaves?
Not as much.
No.
So they could get away with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is going to cure global warming as well at the same time, isn't it?
It would definitely help. Yeah.
It's always in the immediate aftermath of some sort of eruption. Krakatoa, there was another more a huger one.
Reykjavik.
I can't remember the name of it.
Reykjavik, and that was in 2010.
There was one in 1786 in Indonesia, and it blotted out the sun for 2 consecutive years, and the following year we had the French Revolution. Because all riots are bread riots, ultimately. It's food shortages that kicks it off. And that is usually caused by a bad harvest.
Well, look what's happened.
It's itself been caused by some kind of extreme weather event.
But now the food shortages with the lockdowns in Shanghai, that's the only... You don't usually see Chinese people get wild and riled up in the streets, but you take away the food and it's on.
Absolutely, you're quite right. Celebrity tittle-tattle now. Johnny Depp, Amber Heard. I thought we'd heard enough of these two. I mean, I feel very sorry for... Well, I have my partisan view on it, but it's all kicking off again. I don't think of the household laundry bills over the years.
Yeah, Johnny Depp claims ex-wife Amber Heard or friend purposely defecated on his bed. Is the headline here in the Daily Star, of course.
And then concealed it, I believe.
Well, they tried to say, now the thing is, if you're a dog owner, this would quickly fall through one way or the other. Yeah. So allegedly it was Amber or her friend, and I think it would be a friend that you'd want to do this on your bed, left a little bit of a deposit.
Any kind of friend.
If you're any kind of friend, left a deposit on his bed. Yeah. Now, she tried to blame it on the dog. Now, I don't know if you're a dog owner. I'm a dog owner.
Yeah.
You become quite familiar with your dog's moments, and you'd be able to tell if it was the dog.
And how big is their dog? Do you know?
How big is their dog?
Couple of pounds.
It was a
little poodle.
It was a Yorkshire Terrier.
Yeah, Yorkshire
So
Terrier.
you'd be
They're
able
like,
to tell
like a furry canary.
if it was Amber's friend or the Yorkshire Terrier.
Yeah.
Unless, she's a Hollywood star. They got skinny friends. Maybe it was like a tiny little.
I just don't even know how you could dignify. Like, how do you do that? How do you actually rectify with? I can't with that story.
The
I don't
thing
even know
about
what
the
to say.
story is, and I don't mean to sort of gloat or dwell on it, but Johnny Depp, he arguably the most beautiful man in Hollywood of the last 50 years. My
Arguably.
kids love him. My wife loves him. I love him. Everyone. You can't help looking at Johnny Depp. Certainly in his prime. He's getting past it a little bit now. And you just think, he took all those great roles, the Tim Burton movies, he made interesting artistic choices, he also made loads of money as Jack Sparrow in the Pirates of the... You think this is the most gifted, he's had the most charmed life imaginable. And then you lift the curtain and you see, oh my God.
Or he
has sunk to the very... I mean, I'm not blaming him, but you know what I mean? It's like the bigger the front, the bigger the back. There's always something that balances it all out.
I just don't know how you can get with someone 20 years younger. I mean,
No, that was a mistake, I think,
come
wasn't
on
it?
now.
There is something to that, I think, because there's a whole litany of horrible things she said to him, demoralising things to break his spirit.
Sure.
But the one that kept coming back was old man, old man, old man. That's nasty.
I mean, it's hard, especially as a Hollywood actor.
Yeah.
But you know what? She's not looking so young herself. I don't know if you saw her sitting in court.
Ironically, for somebody who's named after the very substance that sustains suspended animation for millions of years, the amber, of course, the little, that was probably wishful thinking on her parents' part.
But I think in this case, it wasn't so much about pulling back the curtain on his life, but lifting the duvet.
Lifting the duvet.
And that's what the problem is.
Remake of The Godfather, a story reminiscent of a Greek tragedy now, an unfortunate Brazilian baby, Dana, who...
Unfortunate.
Don't want to poke fun at this, although I think he survived this.
He's
but anyway,
Okay, yes, a Brazilian boy was born with 2 penises because of a 1 in 5 million defect, and he gets the bigger of the duplicates cut off.
Oh,
I mean,
no.
How do you break it to your kid later in life? You know,
one of them was just too big. You wouldn't have wanted that.
But when when you were a baby,
yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, when it comes to these things, especially when they're so little, I mean, unless it's going to cause some kind of a complication, who knows? 2 might be kind of fun when he's older.
Perfectly. I can do this with my tongue. I've never found a use for it, but yeah, my daughter.
I bet you he could find a use. I bet you he could find a use.
There is got to be, sooner or later. But everyone likes to have something, don't they?
Did not expect to see that this evening or this morning, whenever you're watching the show.
This is the last story we have time for this evening. I don't remember this one in Mary Poppins, Eric. What is this?
Is this about the council, the bread?
Bird feeding.
Yes.
Yeah, feed the birds.
This is from the Mirror. The council compared to communist China. No hyperbole there. Over patrols that are stopping people from feeding the birds. And this is the Leicester City Council. They found some slices of bread on the ground, and they quickly realised that
slices
had been leaving them for the birds.
I know, they're a bit lazy, aren't they?
I know, they're supposed to tear up the bread at least. But they said that they basically removed the bread, and they're going to put up signs warning people not to feed the birds bread. They can't afford the signs yet because they don't have enough dough. Oh, come on.
Did you get this off Twitter? Twitter.
You see? It's catching. But they did say that they're going to patrol the area and they're going to get up early in the morning to get the bird feeders. So early the warden catches the bird.
Yeah.
I'm not totally against this because they want to stop this because of the rats coming into the park.
Yeah.
And I saw a bird eat a rat the other week, and I will.
A rat eat a bird?
Yeah, it was a raven. I saw a raven eat a rat.
Oh, I would go for
It
that.
will never
I would
leave
pay
me.
for that.
That's because it didn't have any bread.
It will never leave me, that
the
sight.
raven.
It was the worst afternoon. Not too far from here.
That's amazing. A raven in a park eating a rat.
No, in the street.
In the street?
In the street.
Did it put its foot on the back of the rat, or did it just...
First, my guy was like, don't look over there, Dana. So, of course, I look over there, and I'm just like, oh, my God.
So
and then I just ran down the
beak,
street.
Right? It's killed it with the beak. And
it's on the floor, and I'm like, what is it eating? Oh, my God, it's a dead rat.
If you ever walk up in the Lake District, and sometimes you think you see an eagle or something, but they're ravens, they're huge.
Yeah.
They're really flying. Yeah, you think of them as just a big... Crows are pretty scary, actually, when they get up close. But that's why it is. It's not because there's also you shouldn't feed birds.
You're not supposed to give them bread. It's not as good for them. Yeah, but I think it was
unless it's sourdough.
But Northwest Leicestershire MP Andrew Brigden said it's like communist China, stopping you feeding the birds. It's Big Brother watching you in Leicester.
Please, whatever did they shout at them in the tower blocks in Shanghai? Repress your urge to feed the birds.
I think he might be exaggerating.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for. My thanks to Dana and Eric for wonderful company tonight. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Tomorrow night we have Dominic Frisby in this chair. I will be off elsewhere, but it's been a pleasure, and I hope I'll see you again next week. This is Simon Evans signing off for Headliners. Good night.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm